Hey everybody, what's going on? It's officially NHL Draft Day and there's plenty to dive into in this video. Before we get started on that, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. It's as easy as clicking in the bottom right hand corner of this video. There's new videos every Friday on the Montreal Canadiens. Now there's plenty of speculation out there and there's some things you have to believe and some things that you shouldn't be believing at this time of year. The Montreal Canadiens have the 5th overall selection in the 2024 NHL Draft, and there's plenty of different variables that will go into who the Montreal Canadiens ultimately land with that selection. I would say there's about a 98% chance that the Montreal Canadiens will be making that selection on the podium tonight in Vegas, but there's always the outside chance. You never really know what's going to happen on draft day, and we've seen those big deals go down before, but as of right now, it looks as though the Montreal Canadiens will be making that selection. As for who that selection will be, well, it's really anybody's guess at this point. The information that I've been going off of and from what I've been hearing leading up into tonight is that the Montreal Canadiens are very high on three players: Caden Lindstrom, Ivan Demidov, and Zeev Boyum, the defenseman from Denver University. I think there's plenty of different outcomes that will have the Montreal Canadiens selecting any one of these three players, with an outside chance that Anton Salayev does slip to that 5th spot. I think he at least gives the Montreal Canadiens some pause. Personally, he wouldn't be my selection, as I don't believe that he necessarily has that gigantic upside like his frame suggests. I don't know that the offense will be there in the NHL, even if he does turn into that big shutdown defenseman that teams covet. I don't really believe in the upside of the player. So let's stick on the top three options that I believe are strongly in the mix for the Montreal Canadiens' top pick tonight. I think with all things being equal, if the Montreal Canadiens had their choice and no teams in front of them were going to be able to make that selection, I think that they would be looking at Caden Lindstrom for their pick at 5th overall. I think there's a lot of qualities to his game that the Montreal Canadiens believe will translate to not only regular season success in the NHL, but more specifically playoff success. You win down the middle of the ice, and if the Montreal Canadiens somehow were able to move Kirby Dach to the wing and put Lindstrom behind Nick Suzuki, or even potentially ahead of Nick Suzuki on the depth chart down the middle, I don't think they would hesitate to do that. Here's where things get interesting though. Caden Lindstrom is the odds-on favorite on multiple betting websites to be the 4th overall selection in the NHL Draft, which is currently held by the Columbus Blue Jackets. There's also plenty of news surrounding that selection that the Blue Jackets could trade out of that pick, in which case Caden Lindstrom still makes a lot of sense for a team willing to trade up, but so could a defenseman as well, in a defenseman-heavy top 10. There's just a lot of variables right now with these selections, and I think it's one of the more unpredictable top 10s that we've seen in a very, very long time, which creates plenty of buzz leading up to the event, which NHL fans certainly shouldn't hate. So I think that there's plenty of options here with that 5th overall pick for Montreal. I think Lindstrom's at the top of the list. I believe that the debate, if the Montreal Canadiens are left to decide between Demidov and Boyum, that's where things get really interesting. I'm not really sure which direction they would ultimately lean, but I can say for certain that either one of these selections would be a tremendous pick for the Montreal Canadiens, even with their surplus with left-handed D right now on their potential roster down the line. I think that they don't really have anyone like Boyum in their system right now, and that he would immediately become not only their highest ceiling prospect, but also a potential #1 defensive prospect, which I don't believe the Canadiens currently have in their system. I'm very high on Lane Hudson and what he can bring to the table, but I'm not sure he's ever going to get to that point in the NHL just because of his lack of size. I think that there's a lot of upside in some other defensemen in Montreal's system, whether that's Caden Gooley, Logan Mailloux. There's a lot, David Reinbacher. There's a lot of upside in these players, but I don't know that any of them really peak as a #1 defenseman in the NHL. Sure, if you have a bunch of #2s and #3s, you could formulate a really strong defensive core, but I think Boyum really elevates that ceiling for the Montreal Canadiens on defense and would be a really interesting selection if they're not really comfortable with what they're getting from Demidov, but that's not really the information I've been given. I've been given the information that they really like both of these players, and I think that that's something that the Canadiens are going to have to wrestle with on draft night tonight if both are on the board and Lindstrom is gone with that 5th overall pick. So I do believe that the Canadiens really like Demidov. I also really believe that they also really like Boyum. So I think tonight's going to be really interesting. And there could be some potential fireworks if the Canadiens ultimately do go with that defenseman with the 5th overall pick. It would not surprise me from what I've been hearing if the Montreal Canadiens do select a defenseman that they quickly turn around one of their defensemen in their system right now and make a trade for a bona fide forward. I'm not really sure what names are being out there right now, but there's a lot of names out there on the block right now that fans just don't know about. So I think that tonight is going to be a really interesting night for the NHL and more specifically for the Montreal Canadiens. So buckle up, Habs fans, and get ready for what could be a very monumental draft night in Montreal. That's it for me today from Cook's Corner. As always, let me know in the comment section down below what you believe the Montreal Canadiens will do with that 5th overall pick and what you want them to do with that 5th overall pick as well. I'm Zach Cook. We'll see you later.